Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio, Sinoland, on the D-Day beaches of Normandy in France. And I am honored and proud to have on the show I guess she's native French, and I'm naturalized French. I think she may be the first French person I've ever had on the show today. Florence de Changy. How are you doing, Florence?
Hi, Jeff. I'm actually French Kiwi, but I don't have the right accent for that.
Well, I'm French American. I think we probably, I became French by marriage, and I think you probably became Kiwi by marriage. I don't know. But anyway, we have a common bond in France, and we're both journalists. We both write books. And a couple of years ago when it came out, I read Florence's book, The Disappearing Act, and I was immediately interested in it because, and I bought it. I bought the ebook direct from the publisher when it first came out, and I was just blown away by it. And Florence did such an incredible, just a Sherlock Holmes, a forensic takedown of the tragedy of the Malaysian Air Flight 370 back in, 2014 now, isn't it? I think 2014.
Yeah. 8 years ago now.
Let me just say, Florence, she is married with 3 sons. She is dual French and New Zealand. I forgot to do the quick intro. So she's a binational Kiwi French. She's based in the Asia Pacific for the last 30 years. And she reports mostly for Le Monde, Radio France, RFI, as well as France 24, France 24. And so I know she's based in Hong Kong. So anyway, thank you so much for being on the show today, Florence.
My pleasure.
I want to impress on everybody, and she's going to provide me with the links to buy the book. It is now available in hardback, paperback, and ebook and audiobook. It's even out on audiobook. I really encourage people to buy this book. It's not a difficult book to read. It's just a wonderful analysis of MH370. And if you don't want to pay for it, ask your library to buy it. Librarians love people to suggest books to put on their shelves or in their ebook file. Ask your school, ask your place of worship. It's really a wonderful, wonderful book. Florence, go ahead and since it has been so long ago, just give us a quick review of what MH370 was and what happened.
Okay. Well, essentially, it's a very big plane, a B777, which is one of the safest, if not the safest, plane in the history of civil aviation, which disappeared with 239 people on board when it was traveling a very common, actually a daily route. MH370 was a daily route, and the plane simply disappeared. And that doesn't happen. So from the very beginning, I was thinking, that can't happen. You can't have such an enormous plane, so many people, essentially bodies, simply disappearing. So it was striking as what I called from pretty early on an insult to human intelligence, to come up with a narrative that we have lost a B777 and we have lost 239 people. We are in a day and age when we can be live with Mars. We can see an apple on the moon. We can target people when they are sleeping in their bed. All this through phenomenal technology. And this disappearance also happened in one of the most monitored and strategic place on Earth, because either when the plane actually disappears, we are in the South China Sea, and God knows how important this is. And if it disappears according to the official narrative, when it's taken over and it's only thanks to the Inmarsat signal, it's in the Malacca Strait. So either way, the moment we lose the plane is not incredible, as we've been told over and over. It is simply not credible. So this is the very base of my research, because I thought, you know, as a journalist, as you mentioned, I've been in this region for 30 years. I've been based in Australia, I've been based in New Zealand, based in Malaysia. I'm currently based in Hong Kong. I was also in Taiwan before. We can't accept that. As a journalist, I cannot accept to repeat such a nonsensical story. And yes, at the beginning, I did, because Le Monde sent me on assignment there. And for the first few days or weeks, you can say, okay, well, you know, it's surprising, etc. But when you revisit the story a few months or a few years later, then no, I'm sorry, that does not add up. And we have to stand up and say, I don't buy the official narrative that the plane has disappeared. Whatever happens, the official narrative that the plane has disappeared is not credible and not acceptable.
Well, like a good murder mystery, I don't want to spoil your conclusions. I want people to read the book because it's just like a funnel, you know, and you just narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down until most likely you have the right scenario for what happened. Even back in 2015, I was thinking about the one where the plane went up to Waziristan and all that, but you showed that was not very likely. And so, I mean, you basically figured it out. What I want to ask you is, how do you think that the United States and Malaysia and Australia and China and Vietnam, how can they pull this off? That's what blows me away.
Yeah, well, when I got to my final scenario, and to be honest, I really stand to be challenged on this one, because I've tried to put together a scenario based on the cluster of, you know, established facts that I had, but I still have some issues myself as to my final scenario. And I know for sure, I would really say for sure, 100%, that the plane did not end in the Southern Indian Ocean.
No,
but
that's for sure.
And that it did not U-turn. That's already very big statements, basically. But for the details of what I came up with, I would not be surprised that when the entire truth comes out, I'm not 100% there. But that doesn't matter. I think the most important part is the fact that the official narrative is a massive fabrication. And as you say, it is involving at least 7 countries. Because, yes, the United States, just because it is the country which in this day and age has got the most sophisticated means of knowing everything about anything and everywhere on the planet. So they cannot not know. The fact that they have never provided any evidence, you know, not even satellite images, not even radar images, I mean, nothing is highly problematic. And of course they know. And there is a file. I mean, there is a lot of evidence, and just logic and just basic knowledge, right? Then of course China. Why China? Because it's happening in China. I mean, very close to China, and the plane
most of the passengers were Chinese. Most of the passengers were Chinese.
Yeah, and the plane was heading to Beijing, which is not irrelevant, I think. Now, where is it happening? Well, it's, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's happening in Vietnam. It is a Malaysian plane. But then you also have Australia, which takes a leading role very early on, because they kind of volunteer to do the search. And you also have the UK, which is taking a surprisingly super important role, even though they have not been mentioned much. But I noticed, and I think it's a very interesting detail, that every time the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, speaks about what he's speaks about the plane and what happened to the plane, he always quotes the UK. he never says, I can tell you that the plane did this. He always says, I've been briefed by the AAIB or by Inmarsat. He basically washes his hand from the official narrative. He only repeats what the UK told him. So you have UK, US, Australia kind of feeding the official narrative. Locally, you have China, Vietnam, Malaysia. You may have, I mean, Thailand, they were nearby. They may have seen something or precisely seen that they did not see what they should have seen. Indonesia, but to a lesser extent, these last two countries. And then you have France, with very surprisingly, is brought in the story later on when there is a flaperon, a piece, I mean, the number.
Didn't they find it like 3 times on Mauritius, or didn't they find it like at least twice? Didn't they find like 2 of them?
They mostly found the flaperon, which was, I mean, a miracle kind of, because, you know, a year and a half and thousands of kilometers away from the crash site, a piece of plane does not float for 15 months and does not travel 4,000 kilometers in the southern Indian Ocean without sinking, basically, you know.
That's a false flag. I mean, that is such, and that's just more proof that it's just not true. It's just to keep us conditioned that it was the South China, that it was the Indian Ocean, that he flew off towards the Antarctic and just disappeared, and it's just to keep us brainwashed. It's just awful.
But the flaperon piece is interesting because you really wonder if they want to make a piece of debris appear somewhere, because the biggest issue with this accident for years was that there was strictly no debris, and that does not exist. When a plane crashes on the ocean, it creates millions of debris. And so now suddenly we had one debris, and they dropped it in French territory. And this is super odd. But you keep in mind that France at the time was the only outside country making a proper independent investigation. And it doesn't seem completely impossible to me that, because French independent investigation in terms of crash, plane crashes in the past, they have been troublesome, including to the US. There is a history of, basically an investigation which is too independent to suit what either the company or the states would like people to know. So it is not completely impossible that at some point, some people may have thought, these French people, they need to be on our side. How do we put them on our side? We drop them, a piece of debris, and they will have to fall in line, basically.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Listen, my only hope is, and what about the next of kin? I mean, do they have a website? I mean, are they petitioning the governments? I mean, those poor people. I mean, they know it's a lie. What do you know about the next of kin?
What is complicated with this group of next of kin, and I think you will have that in most airplanes when you think of it, is that it's a very mixed bag of people. When you look at who was on this plane, of course, it's mostly Chinese people. And you have a very cohesive group of the Chinese families. But they are not very easy to be in contact with, because actually only a few of them speak another language than Chinese. And I am in contact with quite a few of them. I met them in Hong Kong and in Beijing. But then you have a small group in Malaysia, representing probably, the next largest group, but it's still just a few families. And then you have, for example, the French man, Guylain Watrelot, who lost his wife and 2 of his 3 children. He is quite a loud voice in France, talking about MH370. There is a very admirable man also in India, K.S. Narendran, who's wrote a super moving and very well written book about the tragedy. And so you have basically people are not really together. You have some people in Australia, and then other people spread around the world. So they can't really get together and kind of do a class action because it's a complicated group. Yeah.
Well, I guess all we can hope is that when the United States shot down the Iranian airliner in the Persian Gulf, when was that? Back in 1990, during the
I mentioned
Iran,
that,
the Iran
290
war,
civilian.
And the United States denied it and denied it and denied it and denied it for what, 10, 15 years, and then they finally, or maybe it was even longer than that, but they did finally fess up and admit that they shot it down, and they did pay some compensation to all the families. And what, I think your theory makes a lot of sense. So, your filtration down to your scenario or something close to that. And so maybe, in 10 or 15 or 20 years, maybe, the culprit will cough it up, and admit what happened. But it's just an amazing story. And I knew it was poppycock. It's just like, and I was talking to a journalist. We were in Beijing. Yeah, we were in Beijing. And I was talking to some journalists. I think, well, Occam's razor, the simplest version is the easiest. Oh, it just flew off into the sunset, and I'm just like going, nah, no.
I still
go ahead.
I do use the Occam razor principle, and what the American Army has got another acronym which I find very funny for that, which is the KISS principle. Keep it simple,
stupid. Yeah.
Right. And actually, when you think of it, it's also with that kind of reasoning that I came back to my scenario, because how nonsensical and how sophisticated is the concept that this U-turn, this zigzag, this eventual ghost flight to Antarctica. I mean, either we want to make an attempt, a terrorist attack, then you go straight onto the Twin Towers of Kuala Lumpur or something, or you want a suicide thing, and then usually there is a pattern for that. You crash your plane right after you've reached your altitude, or you want to actually disappear your plane. In that case, what would the pilot do? He just goes straight, and he ends in the Pacific, which is actually much bigger and much deeper ocean.
Yeah,
so this completely crazy story that they've made up in itself smells like completely fake.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I really encourage. Usually I have a book when I read a book. I hold it up, but I bought the ebook, so I don't have. Oh, thank you. I have the ebook, so I can't put it up. And
no problem.
But I read it over 2 years ago when it first came out as an ebook, and we've stayed in touch. And you said, well, let's wait until the paperback comes out, and now the paperbacks come out.
Actually, yeah, the paperback has got a few extra details, including the confidence of someone who asked directly to Barack Obama, where is MH370? So that was
really? Okay. I'll have to buy it.
No, I mean, it's just a few extra lines here and there. I can send you what I've added, but anyway, it's about.
Okay, great. Anyway, it's Florence. You did a wonderful job. You devoted 7 years of your life to this book, and as a fellow author, I know what you went through. You crawled across cracked glass to write this thing, and and to tell the truth. And you're like me, you know, I feel like I need to tell the truth, even if it upsets people. And you've done that with this book. And so thank you very much. And I will get this out. I'm going to blast it to the world. And I hope we sell a few copies of your book and make people aware that, you know, we Westerners like to think that we're so superior and so honest and so open and everything else. But this is probably being manipulated from the West, and this huge hoax is probably being manipulated from the West. And so we're not always cracked up what we say we are. And I think this book does a good job of exposing that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And just for you to know, it's still ongoing. I still have some very good leads, and
Okay,
I'm very
good.
hopeful that it won't take that long.
Well, if you ever come back to France, where are you from in France? What part of France are you from?
I was actually born in Italy, so that doesn't help.
Oh. Okay. Well, if you ever make it to Normandy, let me know, and my wife and I would love to invite you for a good Norman meal.
With pleasure.
And my wife and I used to go to Hong Kong. We lived in China for 16 years, and we used to go to Hong Kong all the time and kind of know it like the back of our hands. So if I ever get back to Hong Kong, I'd like to invite you to my favorite place near the Star Ferry on Kowloon side, where they have tea, and you can look at the harbor from the tea room.
Lovely.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. See you, Jeff. Thank you for your time
Very much.
and your investment.
Bye-bye. Get this out. Bye-bye.